Hey guys, that Welsh Nerd here, and today we're going to be looking at the Warhammer Age of Sigmar core rulebook for the second edition that came out with Soul Wars. Now, this is a really chunky book, as you can see here. It's basically, if you've played Warhammer 40k, the 8th edition rulebook in style, where you get a big chunk of core, some miniature galleries, and then ways to play. So on the back then we've got some Stormcast Eternals versus Khorne Bloodbound, because even though this is the Soul Wars, they can't step away from the Stormcast versus Khorne. So we got a little background just explaining what the Mortal Realms are and what this game is, as well as the what's included, such as the core rules, allegiance abilities, open play, narrative play, and matched play. So again, as you can see, they are really pushing that free ways to play even with this new game. So the first chunk of the book, once you get past some awesome artwork of Sigmar and the like, is just fluff, and this fluff is huge. They've really fluffed out the world. Which isn't a bad thing, it's definitely needed. Each individual army gets its own section, especially the newer ones. The old armies get reduced to notes like this. It's not great on the older stuff in my opinion, but it's nice to see that that's still there anyway. And they haven't just been squatted. Each force gets its own section, so this is the Chaos section. Here we get a little bit of background for the Everchosen, Slaves of Darkness, Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, Skaven, Creatures of Chaos, Brayhood, and then some minis, and that is basically the same sort of pattern it follows throughout. Yeah. So once we're past this huge chunk of section, to give you an idea, that much of the book is just fluff. Which is really good in my opinion though, because it does really flesh out the world. You get everything that's happened more or less, right from the end times all the way up to the Souls Wars. You get how the world was rebuilt, etc. So, in the Battles of the Mortal Realm, once you break into this section, you've got the core rules, which have been moved up from 4 pages to about 10, I think it is. With some full colour pictures showing how the rules work, as well as some battle plans there. Which is really nice. It's nice to see they are fleshing out the rules and the like. And they're taking on board criticism. This has really come on leaps and bounds from when the first edition was launched. I think it was 3 years ago now, maybe 4. So yeah, it's really come on well. We get Conquest Unbound, so then we get the Allegiance abilities. You have 4 Allegiance abilities as well as relics and commando traits, which are nice to have. So even if you're playing an older force that probably isn't going to get a battle tome, you can still get artifacts and command traits. It's a really big throwback to the older rulebooks in my opinion, where they included generic magic items, etc. Speaking of magic, each of the realms of battle now has its own spell lore associated with it, which is really nice, as well as individual rules for how to battle on there. And then we come on to the Endless Spells, which are a new thing in this edition, where basically, because of the Necroquake, which is everything that's been set up in Malign Portents, happened, magic has basically become unbound, and now spells can be cast but remain in place. And there's like famous ones where witch hunter mercenaries and wizards and stuff all try to dispel them, which is a really nice touch to the fluff in my opinion. So then finally onto the free ways to play. Now this is something that started with 8th edition I believe, and I think it's something that's going to really continue on through their games. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar thing in the new Lord of the Rings game when that's launched next month. Hell, it's even happening in Kill Team. So, open play games, these are just your, let's say, standard Age of Sigmar games, not matched play. They were the ones we played before we had the General's Handbook, where it'd be stuff like you'd say, okay, I'm going to take 50 wounds, you can take 50 wounds, and we'll take 15 wounds for heroes separate. That kind of thing. I remember doing that. That was actually one of the first games I played in Age of Sigmar. It was quite fun. So it's nice to see that open play is still there. You can just play with your collection. You don't have to worry about armies, etc. And then they've even got ways to generate games with that, which is nice. And these ones are designed around open play because they're basically not completely balanced. They've got how to run ladder campaigns, which is nice. Again, it's just like a little bit of inclusion. Then we're on to narrative play games. These ones are you're replaying events through history. Most battle tomes will include a narrative narrative mission that also works in match play, I believe, or open play at the very least, such as the Nighthaunt one. So narrative play, we have the famous battles, what they are, etc. A awesome big spread out table of the kind of thing you can do with narrative games, because narrative games can include fun rules such as like necromancers being able to reanimate statues and the like, which you can't really do in standard games. So they're giving you ideas here, the Crest of Galmaraz, etc. and campaigns in the Mortal Realms, just because that'll generally be what happens in narrative games. You're usually going to run a campaign, especially in open play. Open play and narrative go together really well, and I wouldn't be surprised if most open play players do play narrative games at some point. So then they've got like a mini campaign system beneath Skull Mountain, so they basically tell you how you can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until one person takes over the opposing fort. Sieges. Now, this was something I wasn't expecting to see in the core rulebook, a set of rules to run sieges, which is quite nice. And it's not just the defender is set up in buildings, whereas the attacker isn't. Stuff. There are proper like siege phases, tactics. You can starve out the enemy. You can attempt to like launch raids in the night to try and weaken their forces, but potentially weaken your own forces. It looks surprisingly tactical and could be really fun for, well, basically the end of the campaign. And that's what they're saying. So we got the Relief Force, Great Wall, etc. Darkest Depths is how we're going to fight battles in tunnels or underground. Again, they're really covering all the bases in this rulebook. I was surprised just to see how much was included in this. And there's battle plans again. Even Triumph and Treachery has returned, one of the last big expansions for fantasy battles, where basically you can try and bribe your opponents and you have secret objectives, etc. And then finally we're on to matched play. Now matched play is basically what everyone knows and loves from war games. You both agree to a point allowance. I reckon the standard for these is going to be about 2,000. That seems to be the best place for most armies. And in Age of Sigmar games are a lot quicker than 40k, I'd argue, just because of the more focus on melee. So, match play, they just talk you through how to set it up, etc. There's specific battle plans for match play that don't favour one another. Pitched battles and what to include. For example, a 2,000 point list must include one leader and can include up to 6. It must include 3+ battle line troops, but there's no limit on them. And then it can include up to 4 artillery and behemoths, but there isn't any limit on them. There isn't any minimum unit requirement. The other units then are stuff that doesn't fit in there, and you can take any number of them. And then allied units, you can take 400 points of allied forces in a battle host, which, again, is quite nice. And it just tells you how command points and all that works. Then we got the battle plans, which are basically just designed to be as equal as possible, so everyone's got a fair chance. And then battle strategies, and then a pitch to battle army roster. So that has been my lickety-quicks review of the Corebook. It's a nice book, it really is. If you're going to be getting the Soul Wars box, this is an amazing thing to have included in it, a nice hardback rulebook. It's a reasonable price to buy on its own if you're not interested in more Stormcast or the amazing new Nighthawk models. It actually feels like Age of Sigmar has proper rules now, which I really like, and I really think that's going to bring a lot more people into the game. You're always going to have the fantasy diehards, and I don't want to dig myself in a hole here, but the game is gone. There's other games you can play. This place, there's Nine Phage, there's Kings of War, etc. I know it's not exactly Warhammer Fantasy, but that's the best you're going to get. This is GW's new IP with it. So, but I think just having an actual core set of rules and designed to be played, etc., is really going to show fans that GW does focus on other projects, not just 40k. As we can see with the releases lately, there's been a lot of Age of Sigmar stuff. So, big rulebooks, big chunky proper rulebooks, and proper in-depth tactical rules, not just 4 pages of them, are all good things in my opinion. I find it hard to find anyone that would argue against that. And I think GW realised from before that the 4 rules, yes, that does sound cool, but when you come into it, it really is lacking in depth, whereas now this seems much more like a finished project. Anyway, ramblings aside, this has been today's video on Soul Wars, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Share your thoughts in the comments down below, whether you like the new edition of Age of Sigmar, whether you think fantasy shouldn't have died in the first place, whether you're refusing to play Age of Sigmar because it's not fantasy, whether you're someone who, like me, who enjoyed fantasy but is willing to embrace new things, and all that jazz. But anyway, for now, this has been That Welsh Nerd, and I will see you in the next one.